Good evening and thank you for joining us. The COVID-19 vaccine will soon be given to all willing residents of Thunder Bay's 6 long-term care homes. The regional hospital has received a second shipment of the Pfizer vaccine, and one of the homes has already started administering the shots. Corey Nordstrom reports.
These pictures show the Pfizer vaccine on the move for the first time in Thunder Bay, making its way from the hospital to one of the city's long-term care homes. This doesn't mean vaccines will stop being given at the hospital, but soon both staff and residents at the homes will be safe from the virus.
The intent is to have all the 6 long-term care homes in Thunder Bay complete by next week, and then we will still have the catch-up of doing the long-term care staff and essential caregivers. So we're hopeful that by mid-February, we're fully complete with all of those that are consenting in long-term care.
The good news comes just as shipments of the Pfizer vaccine to Canada are being reduced according to the federal government. Crocker Ellicott says it won't have an impact on this batch of immunizations, but they will wait and see if it limits them going forward.
We don't know about future shipments expected later this month. We're told by the ministry that we should know later today what the impact of the Pfizer shipment delays will be on all sites across Ontario.
1,100 doses of the vaccine have been administered so far in the city. The hospital president says planning is underway to get the vaccine to long-term care homes in the rest of the district. She says rather than keeping it in those special -70-degree freezers, it can be brought to smaller towns with regular refrigeration and an efficient rollout plan.
The way the Pfizer product is, likely we would not be able to maintain it in frozen state moving into the region. However, the Pfizer vaccine is stable in a refrigerated environment for 5 days, but we just have to be very cautious with our logistics as we were to move forward with that.
Meanwhile, the Northwestern Health Unit in the western part of the region has announced that it expects to receive their first shipment of the vaccine in early February. Corey Nordstrom, TVT News.
There are another 8 COVID-19 cases across our district today, according to the daily health unit numbers. And with that, the Thunder Bay district has now surpassed 700 total cases. 4 of the new infections come from the Thunder Bay area, including 2 related to the ongoing outbreak at the district jail. The 4 remaining cases are from other communities. One of the cases is connected to travel outside of northwestern Ontario. 2 were contracted through close contact. The exposure sources of 3 of the new infections are still unknown at this time. There are no new hospitalizations being reported today. There are still 3 COVID patients in hospital, including 2 in the ICU. There's also no change to the active case count at the Roseview Care Home. There are 2 active staff cases. Those workers are isolating at home. And finally, one of the 2 outbreaks at Hogarth Riverview Manor is now over. The Birch and Spruce Grove resident area is now in the clear. That outbreak was declared on New Year's Day after 1 staffer tested positive. The outbreak that was declared on Hogarth's 4th floor earlier this week is still in effect. Thunder Bay Police Chief Sylvie Hoff has delivered a video statement to city residents regarding police enforcement of the new stay-at-home order. To date, police have issued 0 fines and just 2 cautions under the Reopening Ontario Act. The video details how police will take a, quote, fair and reasonable approach to enforcement. Hoth says officers will follow a simple formula when dealing with those who aren't obeying the rules.
All have an obligations regarding the provincial orders. The members of the Thunder Bay Police Service will continue to focus on the 4 E's. Engage with the individual, explain why we are there, educate on the rules and regulations, and enforce as a last resort. This approach has proven to be very successful.
Conservative MPP Roman Baber has been kicked out of the Ford government caucus. The York Centre member called for the end to the lockdown this morning. The Premier hit back, accusing Baber of spreading misinformation. Colin DeMello has that story.
As Premier Doug Ford fights a pandemic, today he found himself fighting a member of his own government.
Premier, we've seen a great...
MPP Roman Baber issued a public letter this morning calling on the government to reverse the COVID-19 lockdowns in Ontario, claiming they're doing more harm than good.
If the medicine is killing the patient, then perhaps we should reconsider the medicine. And I am of the view that lockdowns are much deadlier than COVID.
The letter was immediately met with anger from the Ford government. The premier called the comments irresponsible and accused Baber of spreading misinformation, while the health minister expressed strong emotions.
Well, I am angry. I am angry because I know that many people are working around the clock to save lives.
Christine Elliott says the UK variant of the virus is pushing transmission rates higher in this province. There's been a 61% increase, she says, in hospitalizations over the past 4 weeks, and critical care units are now in triage mode.
If we aren't able to accommodate everyone in our hospitals, then decisions will need to be made about who is able to go into intensive care, who is able to be on a ventilator.
Which is why Baber's letter ignited so much fury in the Ford government, leading to a swift removal from the Progressive Conservative Party.
Colin, I've been made to understand shortly after 9 a.m. that I will no longer sit with the Conservative caucus.
Elliott says Baber has voiced his concerns privately before, but the public letter, filled with misinformation, she says, was just too much to bear.
Over 5,000 families in Ontario have lost a loved one due to COVID. So I found his letter was really disrespectful of those families and also did a disservice to the tremendous healthcare professionals that are out there each and every day.
And so Baber will now sit as an independent in the legislature, across the aisle from his former colleagues.
The president of the Thunder Bay Chamber of Commerce has weighed in on the impact of the stay-at-home order on the city's struggling business community. The majority of small businesses have been deemed non-essential and had their doors closed when the initial lockdown began on Boxing Day. That 2-week shutdown was then extended another 2 weeks and now until February 11th under the state of emergency. That's a total of 47 days. Chamber President Charlotte Robinson notes how difficult the first lockdown in the springtime was for business owners and their staff, and they're now trying to survive a second lengthy closure. Some are offering online shopping to help with their finances, and Robinson emphasizes that curbside pickup is permitted.
Some mixed messaging, but we have clarified that curbside pickup is still allowed at non-essential businesses, and people are allowed to go out to get purchases. So whether that is by going to a store that is open or whether that is by going to a store to do curbside pickup, those trips are allowed, and so feel free to be doing those trips to help to support business and to make those purchases.
Robinson was among those who spoke at last night's virtual pre-budget public meeting at City Hall. Council will begin going through the 2021 budget line by line starting next week, and the Chamber of Commerce is urging councillors to make tough decisions to bring down the proposed tax levy increase.
The recovery of our economy will be dependent on the recovery of small businesses.
Local Chamber of Commerce President Charlotte Robinson says the business community, much like private residents, can ill afford a municipal tax hike. Even before the latest provincial lockdown measures, a third of local businesses reported that back in the fall, COVID-19 had cost them more than $100,000 in revenue. And 16%, even at that time, stated the pandemic would be their death knell.
We are looking for our city leadership to make the tough but necessary choices that will reduce operating costs for 2021 and the years ahead, so that those savings can be passed along to property owners.
She also doesn't want to massively deplete reserve funds to pay for COVID expenses, possibly leaving the city vulnerable to a future crisis. The latest estimates indicate that council needs to find an additional $4.5 million to cover pandemic expenses not already funded by upper levels of government. That could all come from the stabilization reserve, which currently contains about $12.3 million. But administration has also presented council with a list of 40 other cost-saving options to further reduce the financial toll. There are 2 measures on that list, however, that former City Councillor Ian Angus and the Friends of Chippewa Park don't want to see implemented: the closure of the Chippewa Rides and Campground for the upcoming season. Angus believes with more promotion, the campground in particular can bring in more money.
So there's a real good opportunity to increase the revenue each summer It's nowhere near what it should be.
Councillors also heard from Poverty-Free Thunder Bay, which continues to advocate for the eventual elimination of city transit fares. And at the very least,
as you head into budget deliberations at this very challenging time, we ask that you do not increase current transit fares.
Council will begin making 2021 budget decisions on Tuesday evening. The Fort William Gardens and Curling Club are getting a $1.1 million facelift, with more than $850,000 expected to come from federal and provincial governments. That leaves the city to cover just over $250,000 worth of work, which includes a number of improvements needed to host future events, such as the Scotties Tournament of Hearts in 2022. That money was already included in previous city budgets. The Gardens is getting new flooring to cover the ice surface, a new video scoreboard and digital screens, among other upgrades. The adjoining Curling Club will receive heating and washroom improvements. Fednor has already committed $300,000 to the work, and an additional $551,000 from the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund is expected to be announced soon. A warming centre for Thunder Bay's homeless opened its doors on Victoria Avenue today. The initiative was made possible after City Council approved a $46,000 grant to PACE, which stands for People Advocating for Change Through Empowerment. The funding allowed PACE to hire staff for the warming centre. The building, which is open 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., will provide people a warm drink and snack. But with the new COVID-19 restrictions, capacity is maxed out at 10 to 12 people, plus 2 staff members. Each patron will be able to stay for about 30 minutes so that everyone who needs to has a chance to warm up. PACE Executive Director Georgina McKinnon says typically the homeless go to shopping malls to stay warm. Due to the lockdown, however, a lot of people now have been left with nowhere to go.
Our clients, our members, are the homeless population in large, about 80% of our membership. So it was very important to us because our members are there, we care about them and we hear their stories and we go home and we worry about them. We've worked really hard to make this happen. So I want to say a big thank you to the city for providing the funding to staff it.
The warming centre is currently expected to stay open until March 31st, but it's possible that that could be extended based on weather conditions. A new mental health and wellness support program provided for those in Anishinaabe territory has reached more than 200 clients in its first few months of service. The Nan Hope program began last summer with a goal of connecting people from the 49 First Nations to virtual support centres. 3 services are offered: a toll-free crisis line, navigators that provide connections to mental health experts, and rapid access to counselling. Wellness navigator Madison Schell says the feedback so far has been positive, and May Catt, a member of NAN's COVID-19 task force, says the service was overdue.
So historically, Anishinaabe Nation has, our young people especially have really struggled with mental health conditions. So we reached out to the partnership to ensure that during the pandemic that we could provide services to anyone who was in need.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of feedback from people, not only as part of just an initial one-time caller saying like, hey, I'm really struggling and I need help. But then further to that, we follow up afterwards. And that's the really key piece of that navigation and that coordination, that ongoing follow-up, just to make sure that people are satisfied with the service, that they're not left hanging and that there's no gaps within that service.
Nan Hope counselors and representatives are planning to continue the service after the pandemic is over, as the virtual methods of communication have been successful reaching those in remote locations. Ski hills across Ontario have been forced to close, and while local hill owners don't agree with the measure put in place by the province, they've found a way to adapt and reopen their doors this weekend, but not to downhill skiers. Michael Mahorovich explains.
The hills are quiet, the chairlifts are still, and the chalets are closed. The frustrated owners at both ski areas are doing their best to stay patient, but they just want to know when skiers will be allowed on the slopes again.
Definitely a very hard pill to swallow these days. As you can see, it's very quiet out here on a Friday. Generally, we're hustling and bustling.
The provincial closure has been difficult for us. It's the unknown that's making it complicated.
With the provincial order set to expire on February 11th, they're hoping to have a firm commitment on a reopening date in the days leading up to it.
We've been asking for a commitment from the province to let us know whether or not this is going to be something that we're able to do come, February 11th, 12th. And if we get that commitment, we'll resume our snowmaking operations. We'll resume, preparation for the rest of the balance of the season.
I was ready last week. We thought we were opening up, and everything's groomed out. All runs are ready to rock and roll.
Meanwhile, both ski areas are reopening this weekend for other activities. At Loch Lomond, they've groomed their snowshoes trails, as well as used a GPS to add them to all trails, an app available for most smartphones. And they're allowing cross-country skiers to use the Snoopy Hill for uphill training. The kitchen will also be open for takeout.
We do have a host of snowshoe trails. We have, a large venue here that, we can use for other activities. So some of those activities for people to get out and actually get some, some fresh air and some exercise, we're just kind of retooling one of the bottoms of a ski run to make it a big sliding area.
At Mount Baldy, their cross-country trails and snowshoe trails are ready to go as well. They've used a trail maker to create tracks for cross-country skiers. They'll be open Saturday and Sunday from 12 to 4 with takeout available.
I went in there and packed everything down. We're pretty psyched about it. We know that other cross-country venues in Thunder Bay and elsewhere are doing really well because people are going crazy in their houses right now and they just want to get outside and do something. So we're going to have the fire going and the cross-country trails and snowshoeing, and you can bring your toboggans and come out and have some fun.
Michael Mahorovich, TBT News.
Well, if the hills were open, Fiona, today wouldn't be the best day to hit the slopes. Very gray, very slushy, very wet.
Yeah, and that's because the temperatures stayed so mild. We actually topped out on the plus side at 2. Ironically, that was in the overnight hours. Temperatures dropped during the day, but only 1 degree. So as you can see, not a lot of movement in temperatures, and because we've stayed on the plus side for the last 24 hours, we got kind of a snow-rain mix and then just some drizzle throughout the day. Now, the temperatures have been holding pretty steady across the region. To the west, Fort Frances also had a little bit of light snow earlier today, but they've been seeing their temperatures hold steady in the -2 to -1 degree range for the last 24 hours. Similarly, holding pretty steady up to the northwest into Dryden and Sioux Lookout. Red Lake is the one location that has started to see temperatures drop. In fact, they've dropped 5 degrees in the last hour and a half, and that's because of some cool air coming in from the north, already making Big Trout Lake feel like -13, but everywhere else, they're holding strong at -2 in Armstrong, -3 in Greenstone, with a fair amount of cloud cover, -1 in Marathon, and Sault Ste. Marie also on the plus side, a little bit more wind there. They're currently seeing some light snow move through, and that's just been in the last couple of hours. Here in the city of Thunder Bay, we will drop down to a low of -7, and there's still a chance of a few more flurries as the temperature drops. But that cool air that is already being felt by Red Lake is going to slowly sink across the region. And starting tomorrow, we're all going to see a bit of a cool down. I'll have more details on what that does to your forecast later on in the news hour.
Thanks a lot, Fiona. Well, short-term pain for some long-term gain, at least that's how it's being presented. Pfizer is slowing production of the vaccine over the next few weeks in order to make improvements to then ramp up that production further in the future. We'll have the details on that and more as your Friday News Hour continues.
I want to be very clear, this does not impact our goal to have enough vaccines available by September